Hey everyone, welcome to Pipes, Tobacco, and Whiskey. So today we've got with us Nathan Davis of Kaywoodie Pipes. Now the interesting thing is that it's not always been Nathan at Kaywoodie Pipes. So thank you for doing this with us today.
Yeah,
we
for
really
sure.
do appreciate it. Before we get into the story of Kaywoodie, I'd like to learn a little bit about you and how you got into smoking pipes.
Okay. I guess I was in college when I picked up a basket pipe at a kind of a head shop in Schenectady, because I went to Union College in Schenectady, New York. But it was just kind of a passing thing and didn't really think about it too much. Broke it out once in a while, whatever, pouch aromatics. But then years later, I was in bands all the time. I was playing out, and then before long, I was smoking cigarettes because everybody around me was taking the same breaks. So after a couple years of that, I was like, I don't really enjoy this, but I did learn to enjoy tobacco. Even as a cigarette smoker, I was seeking out like the weird Izmir and Oriental tobaccos, and I was like, wait a minute, there's like a whole hobby behind all of this. So I wanted to quit the cigarettes and decided that was a good way to do it. I picked up in Albany. I was living in Schenectady again, actually, then. And Albany, New York has Havana, which is the shop that Pipes and Cigars. Russelette started out there.
Okay.
All the Scotty blends came from the owner of that shop, who went on to do that. And then we have Ed Lee's as well. And Ed Lee's is an amazing shop. And then Park Lane, not too far away. So I started circling all the different shops, picking up a couple of basket pipes and jar tobaccos out of there.
Just for a reference, about when was this?
This is, say, somewhere between 10 and 15 years ago, probably.
Okay.
If I had to guess.
So in the early 2000s?
Yeah, it's probably a good
Okay.
time frame. Yep. I started exploring the pipe options and tobacco options that way. And then really what set it off was that I started going to flea markets in random places, and I found a 1937 Kaywoodie, really cool pipe, little bent guy, super small, and I got it for like $5. And I was like, okay, that's pretty crazy, and then started researching the company, discovering that it was this, New York housed company and had started, in the 1800s, and I was like, all right, that's pretty nuts, and that led me down to continuing to look for more and more Kaywoodie pipes. I'm really passionate about kind of one thing at a time, or too deep into one thing.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Are you one of those guys that once you start something, you're just head deep in it?
Yep. So pipes were fun, but then when I had a brand and a company to look into, then it was really deep, and that's what really set the tone for me to leave behind other forms of tobacco and just really enjoy pipes.
Yeah. So you started in the early 2000s with your smoking, and you transitioned from cigarettes back to pipe smoking.
From experimenting with pipes to then back to seriously with pipes.
So what were some of the things that you enjoyed to smoke back then?
Any Virginia blends that I could get my hands on. So I liked going to the shops and being able to like smell it and handle it. I still didn't really like aromatics, but there were a lot of small batch Virginias, or at least the shops say they are. They're probably reblended from somebody, but at the time especially, I didn't know any of that. So it was a lot of Virginias. I hit English pretty hard shortly thereafter. I got a little taste of Lata Kia, and then I will admit that I went really down that rabbit hole until I was looking for like 50-60% Lata Kia blends. But then one day, everything tasted salty, and I couldn't taste the Lata Kia, and I got really nervous that it was the pipe in general. But as soon as I cut Lata Kia out, all of my taste came back, and I found that I had to take breaks from Lata Kia periodically, or something in my mouth chemistry made it no longer.
I'm a big fan of English blends.
Yeah.
But all I've been smoking the last 3 months are red Virginia blends.
Yeah.
And it's weird how your palate begins to change like that, and a break from it, you appreciate.
Yeah, it brings you right back to
Yeah.
what you loved about it. And so I'm known as a huge McClellan fan and got really into their Virginias for a long time, especially before they closed when it was readily available. But the same thing, I found that if I cycled off of that and came back to it, I had a whole new love for that vinegar smell and that bite of a good red Virginia. So now I really like to cycle through different.
So if you like that, then you'll like our blend that Sutliff is doing. I know you've got your own blend from Sutliff, but
4 of them.
our Hunter's Camp blend.
Yeah, I grabbed a couple tins of it.
Is like 80% red Virginia.
Awesome.
I mean, it is, and Sutliff makes the best red Virginia.
Right now, that's the best red Virginia on the market.
And so it's right up there. We tried to model it after the McClellan Anniversary blend of 2002.
Yep.
We're not going to replicate that, but
it's inspiring. It is good enough. Yeah.
All right. Well, then we've got you up to the point where you're an involved hobbyist for sure. What came first, buying or doing the website for Kaywoodie or the Kaywoodie show?
So Kaywoodie as a retailer came along first. So I had started hand carving pipes as a fun thing, as a hobby thing. I never meant to go anywhere with it.
Well, let's back up then. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I was really big on the Pipes Magazine forum, listening to Brian Levine's show, getting on their forum, and getting involved there. It's where I was known as Crash the Gray, which actually inspired Kaywoodie as the name. So I spent a lot of time there. Then I shifted over to the Facebook world, and I joined Briar Nation and got really involved with those guys. And one of the carvers there, Heisenberg Pipes, Jim Brown, he was really inspiring for me and was like, oh, your pipes are really nicely shaped. If I taught you how to do some other things, you could really take this farther. So I actually drove down to his house, took some vacation from work, spent almost 2 weeks learning directly under him, and he had a lot of upgrades happening. So he sent me home with essentially a pipe shop in my, backseat of my car to get started. A wood lathe, a buffing motor with some shaping wheels, and a lot of that had been handed down to him from the guy who taught him. He's been retired out of pipe making for a while now, so of course it's going to escape my mind when it matters most.
Now the Heisenberg emblem, is that the one with the
atom.
globe it's an atom, with the things going all around, I've seen those pipes.
He's a multi-PhD, works at labs and everything before all of that. So he kind of embraced that side of his personality, plus, the television show that had the tie-in to that didn't hurt. So at the time that was popular.
The one that we won't mention.
Yep.
But it has the little chemistry stuff on it.
Yep. So I got into carving first, and that's what really, I guess, pushed me too far into the pipe hobby, because now I'm a hobbyist carver. I'm learning about all the different blends and different pipe companies and going too far with it. But when I got hooked on Kaywoodie pipes, I met Bill Feuerbeck, the last owner, and I didn't know that it still was a company. I thought, if it had its heyday in the 1930s, there's no way it's still around. And then to be still around 2 hours from my house blew my mind. But a friend of mine had let me know that Kaywoodie does like a holiday party in December. And, this is only 6 months after I found my first Kaywoodie pipe. And they do a slow smoke, which was another weird thing that I got into. But I'm like, okay, Kaywoodie, slow smoke, all in one. I guess I'll go out to that thing. And it was limited to 50 people. Had a handful of vendors, nothing like this. But that was my first pipe show. So I met Bill and was like, oh, these pipes are amazing. And the new ones, I actually challenged them. I was like, I don't think, the rumors on the internet, oh, everything was better in the past. So I was like, oh, my 1930s Kaywoodies are way better than this trash. And he was like, whatever, okay. He's like, you're not even going to argue with me? He's like, no, I have all the sales I need. I don't need to win you over. I'm like, okay, I respect that. That's pretty funny. But I was like, well, I'd like to compare them. So he sold me a super grain for, half price, his regular retail, not retail, his regular wholesale price.
Right.
And I was like, okay, cool. And it was a little Super Grain Love It. And I smoked nothing but that for like 3 months straight just to put it through the rounds and see if it could really live up to the old ones. And I found I liked it better than the old ones.
Oh.
I was like, okay, fine, that's really cool. But yeah, so that led me to the point of, hey Bill, it's really hard. I have to drive 2 hours. You have to throw an event. Something has to happen. How do I get these? And Kaywoodie had never done direct sales. He only sold to retailers. And I was like, okay, so who's your online retailer? And he's like, not really. It's like, so you don't have anybody who really carries these online? It's like, no, it's mostly small brick and mortars.
And back in the day, this was like Kaywoodie was like, well, not to belittle it, but like a drugstore.
At one time, in the early years, it was so big that they had offices in London and in Canada, as well as the New York offices. And then over time, that kept shrinking, and Medico and Yellow Bull shrunk even more than Kaywoodie. And they had each their own separate sales force and factory, and then it all moved into one. And then, really, when Bill's father was running it in the 80s, 90s, it became a drugstore brand. Quality wasn't quite, so as of the 4 generations of Feuerbachs who ran the company, his father was the least pipe centered.
Yeah.
He was much more business.
Right.
So for a while there, the quality wasn't the same, and they were selling to the military PX. And once that was a deal, they're like, okay, we'll sell to the drugstores.
Yeah.
And they became good pipes. The briar was still good, but the eye to fit and finish and all of that is what was lacking.
Yeah.
And the modern pipe maker was moving farther and farther away from the concept of the stinger and the gadgets and gizmos. It was when Bill came in, he'd started taking over in the late 90s and, learned all of the trade. And then by 2000 and on, he was kind of becoming the head carver and then taking over the business side. And that's when he removed the stinger and really focused on quality. Let most of the people go and became, the one-man shop that Kaywoodie kind of became known as later. So while it's a production pipe, it's also an artisan pipe because one man touches everything, handles it, and makes it.
Yeah.
It tanked for a while, and then really the very late 90s into the early noughts is when it came way back in the public eye as well as actual quality, to be honest.
So you're telling us how you wanted, there was no way for an online sales, and then
Bill made a joke about, just quit your job and do it yourself. And I was like, it's a pretty good idea. And he laughed. He was like, no, you're a nanotech chemist who works at a law firm. You're nuts. And so we joke about it. I wrote patents I was a patent agent, and I was writing patents for some of the fields that I really loved. And a lot of that work started going overseas, and I started shifting into more pharmaceuticals and things that didn't really keep me passionate about what I did anymore.
Right.
So I would call him up and complain about my job and joke about quitting one day. But then one day I really did. I was miserable. My wife was super supportive, so when my daughter was born, I had her quit her job, and she was 7 years just supported by me. And so when I talked to her about how miserable I was, she's like, you've done so much for me. Why don't I get a job, and why don't you see what happens were you to step back a little bit and make less money? But we're talking 6 figures to almost nothing.
Whatever you can get, yeah.
So I don't know if she quite understood how much leeway she was giving me. But so I literally called Bill up one day and said, what is a minimum Kaywoodie order? How many do I need to get? And he still thought I was joking, but he was like, 20. I was like, like 20 grand? Like $20,000 order? He's like, no, 20 pipes. I was like, I only need to order 20 from you for you to make my own batch. And he's like, yeah, that's good enough for me. He's like, wait a minute, you're kidding, right? I was like, no. He's like, please tell me you didn't quit your job. I'm like, it's already done. There's nothing we can do now.
We're starting it now.
Yeah. He's like, you have a website? And I was like, I already bought the URL. I've already kind of been working on the back end leading up to it, knowing that I was pretty serious about this, just not telling anybody.
Yeah.
So yeah, I ordered the pipes, and he had them ready in about
20
a week.
pipes.
Yep, 20 pipes. And that was the first Kaywoodie inventory that came out.
Just give me an estimate of what 20 pipes would have cost you.
Let's see.
I mean, a couple of thousand, right?
Yeah.
Just not a whole lot.
Yeah, like $5,000-ish.
Yeah. Gosh.
And he did, especially in the early days, he would do 30 to 90 day payback period. So he'd send them to me, then I could list them and sell them, and then pay him, and then keep the profits after he was paid.
That's how business was done a long time ago.
Yeah, and again, 173 years, he was prepared to do it that way, but any other company I could have worked with would not have done that.
You're right. Nowadays, it's cash on the barrel head.
Yeah.
So you've established your website. You've bought your first 20 pipes.
Yeah.
Now what?
So, they sold pretty fast. I'd spread the word. I was already known as the Kaywoodie guy.
When did this happen?
5 years ago.
Okay.
2019 is when it launched.
Just before COVID, huh?
Yeah. That was scary. Because I went into it thinking shows were the answer, and then all the shows went away. But I actually saw a pretty big uptick in my online sales during COVID. Seemed like every time there were more restrictions and more incentives, people had money and nowhere to go, so they spent a lot of money at Kaywoodie, thankfully.
Actually, those online sites are what kept the pipe community, sane.
Yep. Yeah, I saw a big uptick in the forum usage and all of that, and then sales.
And then all of a sudden, all these video platforms started showing up for pipe club meetings.
Yeah, virtual pipe club and all those guys. Yeah, it was really cool. But yeah, so you asked about Kaywoodie or the Kaywoodie show. What's weird about that is I started my own business. I have no background in business. I have a chemical mind and a philosophical mind, so I never really saw myself as the business type. I just liked being with pipes more. That was the only reason I cared about business. But a friend of mine had a son in college who was having a lot of trouble getting a business internship. And so she asked me, and I was like, I can't teach him anything. I barely know what I'm doing. But it helped him with school, so why not? And so while he was my intern, I discovered I had learned a lot more about business than I knew that I had learned. And he had brilliant ideas. So the Kaywoodie Show, the podcast, that was his idea. Starting the Albany Pipe Show, Capital Land, that was his idea. He just started laying out all these things and saying, here, let me just lay out how you should do this, and then you start it, and all of it took off.
Nice.
So, yeah, the Kaywoodie Show, especially, through the time that Bill was slowing down a little bit, there were signs that maybe something was going to happen. So I had some downtime. Sales were really good at Kaywoodie, but I'd also gotten really streamlined in how I ran it, so it wasn't keeping me as busy as it used to be. So the Kaywoodie Show was just a nice way to kill a couple hours a week, creating some content, working with my co-host Eugene, who does all my art and does the Sutliff limited edition art. It was something fun for us to do together, along with Capital Land. Little did I know now, it's really hard to pull that, time together every week. But we enjoy it so much that it's been a lot of fun. And
it becomes a monster if you're not careful.
Yeah, when we launched it, we said it was going to be every other week. And by episode 3, the only complaints we were getting was, I don't want to wait 2 weeks. So we moved to weekly, I think on the 4th episode, and it rolled from there. It was meant to be a way to generate business. You know, he owns Uncanny Pipes as well. So we were really looking at it as a way to advertise for both Kaywoodie and Uncanny, and to talk about Capital Land Pipe Show in Albany happening. But it became its own beast. And now, yes, it's still free advertising, but that's not why we do it anymore.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of fun. And I've always known a lot of people in the hobby, but now between Kaywoodie and Kaywoodie and then the podcast, everybody knows me. You walk in a room and just everybody is aware of who you are already. So it's been a lot easier to just walk up, talk to people, and have a good time.
Yeah, you know we don't do this for the money because there is no money.
No, yeah, and we actually actively turn down most sponsorships. We don't want a direct monetary reward for doing this. It feels like it cheapens it in some ways.
Yeah.
And we get to say whatever we want.
That's
Once
the
I
thing.
take on a sponsor, then I have to be careful about
Not hurting their feelings.
Yeah. You know, it's well known that Sutliff sponsors a lot of what we do, but they're not a direct sponsor. So when I get a Sutliff tobacco in, I'm allowed to say that it's crap. It doesn't happen very often, but they're not offended by it if I'm just being honest.
That's the same with us. We are so monetarily deep into this because we purchase everything. Everything, so that we can give a truly unbiased opinion.
Yep.
You know, and I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah,
I really do.
For sure.
So, where can people get your, download your podcast for Kaywoodie Show?
Yeah, the Kaywoodie Show. Just search the Kaywoodie Show. It's on Apple. It's basically anywhere there are
any
podcasts. Any platform. The only place we're not on is YouTube, because we don't have a video component, so we never pushed into YouTube. However, we're actively talking right now about converting our files to something that would be compatible with YouTube in some way. But neither Eugene nor I ever wanted our faces to be a part of it, so we didn't do it. You
have a face for radio,
yes.
Is that what it is?
Exactly. Yep.
Well, so that kind of tells us, now what episode are you guys on in your podcast?
113, I think, just came out.
And you're doing it every week?
Every week, yeah.
So that's over
2
2 years. Yeah, I know how that feels.